The bag came off her head in a room that smelled like cigar smoke and cold money. Gloria Reyes blinked into a hard white light and understood three things very quickly. She was in a windowless room she didn't recognize. Her wrists were zip-tied in her lap, the plastic biting a red line into her skin. And the four men standing along the far wall were the kind who did not fidget, the kind who had learned, somewhere, to stand perfectly still while terrible things happened in front of them. She should have been screaming. Some distant, sensible part of her noted this with mild professional interest, the way she might note a rounding error. Instead, she was cataloguing the room the way she catalogued everything. The reinforced door, the bank of monitors glowing against the dark, the safe in the corner with the newer keypad, the man in the center who had not yet turned around. He was the reason the others stood so still. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie, the collar open, and even from behind she could read power in the line of his shoulders, the loose, unbothered ease of a man who had never once in his life wondered whether he was allowed to be in a room. When he finally turned, she saw a face carved from patience and cold, dark eyes, a jaw shadowed with stubble, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to do anything but deliver bad news. "Miss Castellano," he said. His voice was quiet. "Quiet, the way deep water is quiet. Your father owes me a great deal, and he's become very hard to reach." Gloria's heart slammed against her ribs, but her voice came out flat, almost tired. "My father's been dead 6 years. His name was Reyes, and I'm an accountant." Something shifted in the room. A ripple. The men glanced at one another. The man in the charcoal suit did not glance at anyone. He simply looked at her, really looked, the way she imagined he looked at everything, peeling back the surface to see the machinery beneath. Then he crossed to the table, picked up a phone, and read something off the screen. "Gloria Reyes," he said slowly. "Staff accountant, Meridian Casino, swing shift." He set the phone down. When his eyes returned to her, they had changed, not softer, but sharper, colder, in a new direction. Not at her, past her. At the men against the wall. Not Sofia Castellano. "No," Gloria said. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. "Get the car," the man said, still soft, and two of the men peeled off the wall so fast they nearly collided. "Cut her loose." She never saw this room. She never saw any of us. He was going to let her go. She understood that. She should have felt relief flooding through her, should have started to cry, should have done any of the human things a person does when the executioner sets down the axe. But her eyes had drifted, the whole time, to the bank of monitors. To one screen in particular, where a spreadsheet glowed someone had left it open, careless, a ledger of figures scrolling in a font she knew, columns she'd stared at 10,000 times in her own quiet life. It was the reflex of a woman who could not sit in a room with numbers and not read them, and what she read made her forget, for one full second, that she was supposed to be terrified. "Your maintenance vendor is stealing from you," Gloria said. The man going for the door stopped. Everyone stopped. Enzo Marino, though she didn't yet know his name, turned back around, and for the first time all night, the patient boredom in his face was gone. "What did you say?" Gloria should have shut her mouth. Every survival instinct she owned was screaming at her to shut her mouth. Instead, the part of her brain that had spent 11 years finding other people's mistakes simply kept going, because it was the only part of her that felt safe. That screen. She nodded at it, wrists still bound. The vendor line. Every casino runs facilities through outside contractors, HVAC, elevators, that kind of thing. Your payments to that one are perfectly regular. Same amount, every month. To the dollar, she swallowed. Real vendors don't invoice the same to the dollar every month. Their costs move, parts, labor, seasons, fuel. A number that never changes isn't a business, it's a drain. Somebody built a fake vendor into your books and they've been walking money out the back door for a long, long time. The room had gone so quiet she could hear the monitors hum. Enzo Marino walked toward her, slowly. He stopped a foot away, close enough that she had to tip her head back to hold his gaze, and she became suddenly aware of how large he was, how completely the room belonged to him, and how her own life at this moment weighed nothing at all. "One glance," he said. "You looked at that screen for one glance. I look at screens like that for a living." He studied her the way you'd study a lock that had just clicked open on its own. Then he reached down, took her bound wrists in one hand, his fingers were warm, which surprised her, and with the other drew a slim knife from his jacket. He cut the zip tie in one clean motion, close enough to her skin that she felt the cold flat of the blade, and never once looked away from her eyes while he did it. "You were about to let me go," she said. "That was before you told me I'm being robbed." He straightened, and the movement was unhurried. "Final. Now you're staying, until I know exactly how much I've lost." His name, she learned, was Enzo Marino, and he did not run a casino. He ran Vegas, the parts of it that lived under the neon, in the wiring beneath the wiring, the whole invisible architecture of favors and fear the tourists never saw. The Meridian, where Gloria had quietly reconciled ledgers for 11 years, turned out to be one small brick in an empire she'd had no idea she was standing inside. They kept her in a suite at the top of a tower she didn't recognize, 40 floors above the Strip, with a view of the whole glittering valley and a door that locked from the outside. It was the most beautiful cage she had ever seen. There were fresh flowers on the table when she arrived, which unsettled her more than the lock did, because it meant someone had thought about her, and thinking was how dangerous men got attached. The next morning, a man in an immaculate grey suit brought her breakfast, coffee exactly the way she'd have made it, and a laptop. "Mr. Marino would like you to look at everything," the man said. He was older, silver at the temples, with the warm, apologetic manner of a family doctor. "My name is Salvatore. Everyone calls me Sal. I've kept the books for this organization for 22 years. He smiled, and it reached his eyes. "I confess I'm a little wounded that a stranger found something I didn't, in a room she was dragged into against her will." He set the coffee down with great care. "But Enzo insists. So, whatever you need, you ask me. I'd like to see it too. A theft under my own nose, it offends me." Gloria looked at the kind old man with the warm eyes, and she looked at the laptop, and something in the back of her mind, the same wordless instinct that read a fake vendor off a single glance, went very, very quiet. And very, very still. She smiled back. "I'll need everything," she said. "Every ledger, every account, as far back as you have." "Of course," said Sal. "I'll open all of it to you personally." She would remember, later, that his smile hadn't flickered at all, and she would understand, later, that a man who opens all of it to you personally is a man deciding exactly what you get to see. She worked for 3 days. It was, in a terrible way, the most alive she had felt in years. Her real job had been small, fat, fouled and grey, reconciling slot handle, flagging comps, the endless quiet arithmetic of a life spent making sure other people's money added up. But this was an ocean of money, dirty and enormous, flowing through 100 shell companies and cash businesses and offshore accounts, and somewhere in the current, someone had been very patiently, very intelligently drowning a fortune. The deeper she went, the more she admired it professionally, the way one surgeon admires another stitching. Whoever had done this understood the business better than anyone alive. They hadn't stolen big. They'd stolen small, everywhere, in 1,000 quiet places, for years. A skim here, a rounded number there, a vendor that didn't exist, an expense billed twice, a loan to a shell company that was never repaid because the shell company was them. And every trail she followed, she noticed, ran clean right up until the year Sal had personally reorganized the books. Before that reorganization, the theft was visible if you knew where to look. After it, the theft had been beautifully, seamlessly buried. Someone had built the maze, and someone had also, 22 years running, been the only person in the empire trusted to walk it unwatched. Enzo came to her on the 3rd night. She heard the outer lock turn and looked up to find him in the doorway, jacket gone, sleeves rolled to the forearm, a bottle of wine in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. He looked tired in a way she suspected almost no one ever got to see. "You've barely slept," he said. It wasn't a question. There were monitors somewhere then. He'd been watching. "Neither have you." She nodded at the shadows under his eyes. Something almost like a smile touched the corner of his mouth. He set the glasses down and poured, and she noticed the care he took the exact, controlled tilt of the bottle. A man who did nothing by accident. He slid one glass toward her across the table and sat across from her, and the city burnt gold and red behind him. Tell me, he said. Gloria turned the laptop around. The vendor was the tip of it, she said. Once I knew the pattern, I found the rest. It's beautiful, honestly. I mean that professionally. Whoever did this understood your empire better than anyone. You're not being robbed, Mr. Marino. You've been hollowed out. On paper, you look strong. In reality, if 3 of your cash businesses had a bad month at the same time, you'd default on obligations you don't even know you have. You're maybe 18 months from a collapse you'd never see coming. Over 11 years north of $40 million. The wine glass in his hand did not shake, but his knuckles went white around the stem, and when he set it down, it was with the exaggerated care of a man holding a great deal of violence, very still. Who? He said. And there it was, the question she'd dreaded for 3 days. I don't have his name yet, Gloria said carefully, which was the truth, technically, because a name isn't proof. But I have his shape. Whoever this is had total access, for over a decade. He understood the whole structure. He was trusted enough that no one ever checked his work. And there's one seam that gives him away. She pulled up a document, a scan of an old handwritten reconciliation. 11 years ago, someone reorganized these books. Everything before that reorganization, the theft leaves fingerprints. Everything after, it's invisible. Whoever cleaned this up is the same person who's been stealing since. He didn't just rob you. He built the machine that hides the robbery. And then he ran the machine himself. She let it sit. There's exactly one man in your organization, she said quietly, who's had that access, that trust, and that authority for 22 years. Enzo Marino sat very still for a long, long moment. He was very good at not moving. She was learning that about him. But she watched the knowledge land in him, watched him carry it toward the one door in his mind he did not want to open, and watched him stop just outside it. Say the name, he said. His voice had gone flat and dead. You already know it, Gloria said. You've known it since I started describing him. I watched your face. Enzo closed his eyes. When he opened them, something in his expression had died, some last soft thing, some final piece of the boy who had trusted someone once. Sal raised me, he said, almost too quietly to hear. When my father died, he raised me. He taught me this business. He held my mother's hand at the funeral. He is the only person alive I have never once had followed. I know, Gloria said gently. That's how he did it. He didn't move against Sal that night, and that told her more about Enzo Marino than anything else could have. A lesser man would have killed on impulse. Enzo absorbed the wound and let no one see it bleed. He told her to keep working, to build the proof so airtight that no man in his world could ever call it a lie, because in his world an accusation without proof was how wars started. And a boss who executed his father's oldest friend on a stranger's word was a boss whose own men would begin, quietly, to wonder who was next. Build me a case, he said, at the door, that even I can't argue with, because part of me is going to want to. So she built it, and Enzo stayed close while she did. That was how it began, though neither of them called it anything at first. He came at strange hours. It was nearly 2 a.m, 8 days later, when the lock turned and he came in carrying 2 paper cups of coffee and tucked under one arm, in the careless way of a man who'd grabbed it without thinking, a slim book with a cracked spine. He set a coffee in front of her. She'd stopped being surprised that he knew how she took it. You should sleep, he said. So should you. You're the one paying for the electricity. He almost smiled. He sat, and the book slid out from under his arm onto the table between them, and Gloria, because she noticed everything. It was the whole tragedy and gift of her, tilted her head to read the spine. It was poetry. She looked up at him. He was already reaching to reclaim it, and something flickered across the face that never flickered the exact, specific dread of a powerful man caught being human. You read poetry, she said. I read a great many things. Mr. Marino, she let the corner of her mouth curl. You run the most dangerous organization in the American Southwest, and you carry Naruto around at 2 a.m. like a teenager hiding it from his father. For a second, she thought she'd gone too far. Men like him, she'd been raised to believe, didn't get teased. Then Enzo Marino did something she'd never seen him do. He leaned back, and he laughed quiet, surprised, real, and the whole temperature of the room changed. My father, he said, when it faded, Thought books were for people who couldn't afford to hire someone to read for them. He turned the little book over in his hands. I wanted to be an architect. Did you know that? No. Of course you didn't. Nobody does. I was 19. I had drawings, real ones, elevations, load calculations. I wanted to build things that would still be standing in 300 years. He set the book down. Then my father was killed on a Tuesday, and by Friday I was running his territory, and the drawings went in a drawer, and Sal stood behind me at every meeting for a year so no one would try to take it from a boy. That's the thing you have to understand about all of this. He saved me. And then he spent the next 2 decades robbing me blind. Both things are true. That's the part I can't. He stopped. That's the part that's going to hurt no matter how the proof reads, Gloria finished. Yes. She turned her own coffee in her hands. She wasn't sure why she said the next thing, only that he'd handed her something true, and true things asked to be answered in kind. I've spent my whole life being the smart one nobody looked at twice, she said. The heavy, quiet girl who's good with numbers, useful, invisible. You learn to stop expecting to be chosen for anything. You learn to make yourself so competent that people can't do without you, because it's the closest thing to being wanted that you're going to get. She met his eyes. So I understand drawers. I've put a lot of things in drawers. Enzo looked at her across the table, and the look was not the look men had given her all her life, the look past. It was the other thing, the thing she had no calluses against. They put you in that room by mistake, he said slowly, and you were the only true thing in a building full of liars. Do you have any idea how rare that is? To watch a person be exactly what they are, all the way down, with nothing hidden? He shook his head, almost angry about it. You walked into the worst night of your life and saved mine. And you didn't ask me for a single thing. Everyone asks me for something, Gloria. Every hand that's ever reached for me wanted money or a name or protection or my death. You reached in and pulled out the lie I didn't know I was living, and you didn't want anything at all. The room was very quiet. Somewhere far below, the city hummed. It's late, she said, because her heart was doing something unwise, and she didn't trust her voice. It is. He stood. He left the little book of poems on the table, deliberately, and did not take it back. And they both understood that this was the most defenseless thing he had ever left behind in a room. At the door he paused, his back to her. The door hasn't locked from the outside in a week, he said. You could go. The case is nearly built. I don't strictly need to keep you. I know. Then why are you still here? Gloria looked at the number-flooded screen, at the beautiful, ruinous puzzle of his hollowed empire, at the book of Neruda he'd left like a hostage. Because someone has to fix it, she said, and I'm the only one who can. He didn't turn around, but she watched his shoulders change a breath, a loosening. Good night, Gloria, he said, and the way he said her name did something to the air in the room, and she sat for a long time after the lock didn't click, reading poetry she wasn't quite absorbing. The trap took 2 more weeks to build, and Gloria built it the way she did everything, quietly, thoroughly, and 3 moves ahead of everyone in the room. Because she understood Sal now, not just his theft, but his mind, and a mind like that did not build a maze without building an exit. She had assumed from the start that somewhere in the architecture there was a failsafe, a way, if the whole thing ever came apart, for Salvatore De Luca to press one button and move the last of the money, the accumulated fortune of 11 patient years somewhere. No one could ever reach it. A dead man's switch made of currency. It took her 9 days to find it. It lived inside the offshore structure Sal had reorganized, a nested chain of accounts in 3 jurisdictions, and it was, she had to admit, elegant. A single wire authorization, pre-staged, requiring only Sal's credentials and one final confirmation, would sweep roughly $31 million through 4 countries in under 90 seconds and dissolve it into instruments no subpoena on Earth would ever untangle. If Sal were ever cornered, he would not need a gun. He would need 11 seconds and a phone. He would smile and press a button and walk away from an empire's corpse with a fortune, and there would be nothing anyone could do, unless someone got there first. I can't seize it, she told Enzo the night before. The moment I touch those accounts, he gets an alert, and he presses the button, and it's gone. I can't beat his hand. But I can build a wall he doesn't know is there. A conditional freeze. buried under his own confirmation layer. When he presses the button, it'll look like it's working. The screen will tell him the transfer is executing. And it will do absolutely nothing because I'll have repointed his failsafe at an account that goes nowhere. She looked up. He'll checkmate himself and won't know it until the board's already flipped. Enzo studied her for a long moment. You want him to reach for the gun, he said, and find out you unloaded it a week ago. I want him to lose, Gloria said, the way he spent his life winning, with numbers, in silence, knowing it was cleaner and smarter than anything he ever did. She held his gaze. You could put a bullet in him. It would be over in a second and it would mean nothing. Let me end it the only way that will actually land. Let me beat him at the one thing he was better at than anyone alive. Something moved in Enzo's face, respect, and beneath it something warmer and far more dangerous. You frighten me a little, he said. Do you know that? Good, said Gloria. Then I'm doing it right. They moved on, a Thursday, in the counting room deep beneath the meridian, where it had all started. Enzo called a meeting of his captains, the men who mattered, the dozen most dangerous men in Nevada. And this time Gloria stood at the front of the room, and this time her wrists weren't bound, and this time when she raised her finger to the glowing screen, 12 killers leaned in to follow it. Sal sat in the front row with his warm doctor's smile, hands folded, patient. He thought this was an audit. He thought the strange, heavy accountant had found the vendor and a few loose threads, and that he would sit through her presentation, nod gravely, express his professional dismay, and then quietly, over the coming days, decide what to do about her. He had lived 22 years inside his own cleverness. He had no reason yet to think the ground had moved. Gloria walked them through it. Not all of it, not yet. She showed the vendor. She showed a doubled invoice, a phantom loan. She built it slowly, the way you build any good case, letting the captains' faces darken one by one. And she watched Sal watch them, watched him gauge the room, watched the first flicker of something behind his eyes when he realized how much she'd found. And then she said, lightly, almost as an afterthought, of course, whoever did this would have prepared for exactly this room. A man this careful builds an exit. If I were him, I'd have staged a failsafe, one wire, everything left, gone in 90 seconds the moment I was cornered. She tilted her head at Sal, pleasantly, the way you'd ask a colleague to confirm a figure. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. DeLuca? You reorganized these books 11 years ago. You'd know better than anyone how a man might build a door like that. The warm smile held, but something happened behind Salvatore DeLuca's eyes. A fast, cold calculation. 22 years of instinct arriving at a single conclusion. She knows. She's found it. It's over. And a man like Sal did not waste time on denial once the numbers had turned against him. He had spent his life reading balance sheets. He could read this one. His hand moved not toward a gun, toward his phone, already in his jacket, already unlocked, the failsafe he'd carried for 11 years, one confirmation away. He was fast. He was calm. He pressed the button with the serene competence of a man who had always known this moment might come and had prepared for it better than anyone alive. The screen at the front of the room, the one only Gloria could see the back of, showed a transfer executing, processing, wire authorized, sweeping $31,412,000. Sal exhaled, slow and quiet. The exhale of a man who has just walked out the back door of a burning house with the family silver. He even, briefly, allowed himself the smallest smile, private, bitter, victorious. You almost had me, he said to Gloria, and there was something like genuine admiration in it. You're the best I've ever seen. I mean that. But you were always going to be one move behind because you didn't build the maze. I did. I know, said Gloria. That's why I didn't try to catch you at the door. She turned the screen around. The transfer had completed. Processing complete. Funds swept successfully. And beneath it, in small clean type, the destination account the one Sal's failsafe had pointed to for 11 years, the one he'd verified 100 times, the one that had, 9 days ago, quietly stopped belonging to Salvatore DeLuca and started belonging to Enzo Marino. $31 million. Swept, successfully, home. The counting room was very quiet. Gloria watched it land in him, watched the serene competence drain out of Salvatore DeLuca's face and leave something old and grey and stunned behind. He looked at the screen. He looked at his phone, still in his hand, showing him a lie. He looked at his own 11 years of patient genius, turned inside out and used against him in a single conditional line of code he'd never known was there. He had reached for his failsafe and found she'd unloaded it a week ago. "You repointed my own switch," he said. Not angry, just quiet. The bitterness of a craftsman beaten by a better one. "You let me press the button. You let me win, so that I'd empty the last of it into your hand myself. You'd never have moved the money if you thought you were losing," Gloria said gently. "You had to believe it was working, so I let you." She held his gaze, and there was no cruelty in it, only the terrible symmetry of the thing. "You built a maze no one could find their way through, Mr. DeLuca, so I didn't try. I just moved the exit and waited for you to run to it." For a long moment, Salvatore DeLuca simply looked at her, and then because he was, whatever else he was, a man who understood the difference between a fair loss and an unfair one, he inclined his head. A small, formal, terrible bow. One professional to another. 22 years, he said. "I built this house around him because I loved him and I resented him in exactly equal measure, and I told myself I'd earned a little of it back." He glanced at Enzo, and for one instant the mask was gone and something raw and old looked out. "I never once thought I'd be beaten by a woman someone grabbed off the street by accident." "The wrong woman," Gloria said quietly. "The wrong woman." Sal almost smiled. All of it, undone by the wrong woman. Enzo Marino rose from his chair. He crossed the room to the man who had raised him, and the captains went still, and the whole dangerous world held its breath. But Enzo did not raise his hand. He stopped in front of Sal, and he looked at him for a long time. And when he spoke, his voice was terribly, terribly gentle. "You could have asked me," Enzo said, "for any of it. You could have asked me for the world, old man. I'd have signed it over to you and thanked you for taking it." A breath. "You didn't have to steal it in the dark. And you didn't have to grab a stranger off the street and drag her into a room to die, just to buy yourself a little chaos." He shook his head. Slow. "That's the part I won't forgive. Not the money. The girl." Sal had no answer for that. There was, it turned out, no answer for that. What happened to Salvatore DeLuca after they led him out of the counting room? Gloria did not ask. Some arithmetic she chose, deliberately, not to do. There were doors in this world she had decided she was not going to open, and she found she could live behind the ones she'd chosen. She stayed. She told herself, at first, that it was the work, and there was work oceans of it. An entire hollowed empire to rebuild from the ledgers up, 31 million recovered, and a whole rotten structure to make sound. But that wasn't why, and by now she was too honest a woman, with numbers and with herself, to pretend otherwise for long. That night, the same night, the counting room barely cold, Enzo found her on the terrace of the 40th floor, where she'd gone to breathe. The whole valley burned beneath them, gold and red and endless. The empire she'd saved spread out like a thing that no longer entirely belonged to him alone. He came to stand beside her at the rail. For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind moved. Below, a million lights kept their small, bright secrets. "I have something for you," he said finally. He held out a folder. Inside were papers dense, formal, lawyered. She read the first page twice before she understood. "You're giving me the books," she said. "Not a question. All of them. Full authority. Every account, every entity, every dollar this organization moves passes through you now. Or it doesn't move," Enzo said. "No one audits you. No one checks your work. There is exactly one person in the world I have decided I never need to follow." He looked at her, and the cold face had gone soft in the way that she was beginning to understand. Only she would ever be permitted to see. "It used to be him. I was wrong about him. I am not wrong about you." Gloria's throat was tight. "You understand what you're doing. You're handing the woman they kidnapped by mistake the keys to everything you own. They took the wrong woman to Sal's chaos, and to the end of an empire, and to the worst night of both our lives," Enzo said, "and they brought her to me." He took her hand the way he'd taken it that first night. Warm, deliberate, a man who did nothing by accident. "I have decided I am going to spend the rest of my life grateful to the only man who ever robbed me, because in reaching to take everything I had, he handed me the one thing I actually wanted." She looked down at their hands and up at his face, and she thought of the smart, quiet, heavy girl who'd learned to stop expecting to be chosen, who'd made herself indispensable because it was the nearest thing to being wanted, who had put so many true things in so many drawers. "You left your Neruda in my suite 3 weeks ago," she said. "You never took it back." "I know," Enzo said. "I know exactly where it is. I left it on purpose. It's the most defenseless thing I've ever put down in front of anyone." His thumb moved over her knuckles. "I've been waiting to see if you noticed." "I notice everything," Gloria said. "It's the whole tragedy of me." "Then notice this," he said, and he stepped in, and the most feared man in Vegas who had never once in his life let anyone see him reached, at last, for her. Behind them the city burned, gold and endless. The empire she now ran at his side, dangerous and vast and finally, at last, true. And Gloria Reyes, the invisible one, the overlooked one, the one they'd grabbed by mistake, leaned into him at the rail above the whole glittering valley and let herself, for the first time in her life, be seen. "The quarterly numbers are due in the morning," she murmured against his mouth. "Miss Reyes," said Enzo Marino, "you are, as of tonight, the only person alive who can tell me what my own money is doing." She felt him smile. "Take the morning off. Take every morning. The Empire can wait 11 seconds. 90 seconds, Gloria corrected. "It takes 90 seconds to move a fortune. I'd know." And Enzo laughed into the dark against her lips, the free, unguarded laugh no one but her would ever hear. And above the burning empire they had, between them, saved and inherited and made honest, he took the 90 seconds. And then he took all the rest.